The wrestling ring has seen champions rise to glory with million-dollar contracts and sold-out arenas chanting their names, but behind the pyrotechnics and championship belts lies a darker reality that nobody talks about when the cameras stop rolling. Some of the biggest names in WWE history went from living in mansions and driving luxury cars to filing for bankruptcy and struggling to pay basic bills, and the speed at which their fortunes vanished would shock even the most dedicated wrestling fans. These aren't just stories about bad investments or unfortunate circumstances, these are cautionary tales about how fame and fortune can disappear faster than a 3 count, leaving behind broken dreams and empty bank accounts. Before we dive into these shocking financial falls from grace, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you won't believe some of the names on this list and how quickly their money disappeared. Ric Flair built a reputation as the limousine-riding, jet-flying, kiss-stealing, wheeling-dealing son of a gun who spent decades at the top of professional wrestling, but his expensive lifestyle wasn't just an act for the cameras. The Nature Boy lived every single day like he was the world heavyweight champion even when he wasn't wearing the gold around his waist, and his spending habits became as legendary as his matches inside the squared circle. Flair wore custom-made robes that cost thousands of dollars each, owned multiple Rolex watches that could fund a small business, and his bar tabs at various establishments across America became the stuff of legend among wrestling fans and industry insiders alike. The 16-time world champion earned millions throughout his career but spent even more trying to maintain the lifestyle that his character demanded, never considering that the money might one day stop flowing. Flair went through multiple divorces that cost him enormous settlements, with his ex-wives taking significant portions of his earnings and assets each time he signed the papers. His alimony and child support payments alone would have bankrupted most regular people, but Flair kept spending like the checks would never stop coming. When WWE released him in the mid-2000s, Flair found himself drowning in debt with the IRS knocking on his door demanding hundreds of thousands in back taxes. The man who once claimed to spend more on spilled liquor than most people made in a year suddenly couldn't afford to pay his bills, and stories emerged about him taking independent wrestling bookings just to keep the lights on. Flair owed money to ex-wives, the government, and various creditors who had been patient during his glory days but now wanted their payment in full. The financial pressure became so intense that Flair had to return to wrestling well into his 60s, working matches that his body could barely handle just to pay down his massive debts. He sold memorabilia, did autograph signings for a few $100s, and took basically any booking that offered him a paycheck regardless of the venue size or opponent quality. The Nature Boy who once flew first class everywhere now had to carefully budget his travel expenses and think twice before buying that expensive bottle of champagne. Bankruptcy filings revealed that Flair owed over $300,000 to various creditors, a staggering amount for someone who had earned millions during his prime years. His financial troubles became public knowledge, and fans watched sadly as their hero struggled with money problems that seemed impossible for someone of his stature. Flair eventually had to return to WWE multiple times just to earn enough money to stabilize his finances, working as a manager and occasional performer despite his age and physical condition. Jake Roberts terrorized opponents with his python and cold-blooded psychology during his WWE run in the 80s and 90s, becoming one of the most feared and respected wrestlers of his generation. The Snake's promos were legendary, his matches were psychological masterpieces, and his DDT finishing move became one of the most protected and devastating maneuvers in wrestling history. Roberts earned substantial money during his peak years, headlining shows and working main event programs with the biggest stars in the business. But behind the success lurked demons that would eventually destroy everything Roberts had built for himself in the wrestling industry. His addiction to drugs and alcohol spiraled completely out of control, consuming not just his money but his entire life and career. Roberts spent thousands upon thousands of dollars feeding his addictions, prioritizing substances over savings, investments, or any kind of financial planning for the future. WWE fired Roberts multiple times due to his inability to stay clean, and each firing meant less money coming in while his expenses remained the same. He burned through his earnings so quickly that he couldn't even remember where all the money went, just that it disappeared as fast as he earned it. Roberts hit rock bottom so hard that he ended up living in terrible conditions, barely scraping by on independent bookings that paid him a fraction of what he once earned. Stories emerged about Roberts wrestling in tiny venues for a few $100s, sometimes not even enough to cover his travel expenses and hotel room. He gained significant weight, looked years older than his actual age, and appeared to be circling the drain with no hope of recovery. His financial situation became so desperate that he sometimes slept in his car between bookings, unable to afford even a cheap motel room. The Snake that once struck fear into the hearts of wrestling legends now couldn't afford basic necessities, and his health deteriorated along with his bank account. Roberts eventually became homeless, living on the streets and relying on the kindness of fans who recognized him and offered help. His story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of addiction and poor financial management, showing how quickly success can turn into complete financial ruin. It took the intervention of fellow wrestler Diamond Dallas Page to save Roberts from his downward spiral, offering him a place to live and help getting clean. Page's involvement helped Roberts get his life back together, but the financial damage had been done and Roberts had to start over from scratch. The Snake lost everything he had earned during his wrestling career, proving that talent and fame mean nothing when addiction takes control. Virgil worked as Ted DiBiase's bodyguard during the $1 Million Man's legendary WWE run, standing silently behind his boss while DiBiase flaunted wealth and humiliated opponents with cash. The role gave Virgil steady employment and decent money during his time with WWE, even though he never reached main event status or championship glory. When his WWE career ended, Virgil faced the harsh reality that most wrestlers eventually confront when the guaranteed paychecks stop coming. The former bodyguard became infamous in wrestling circles for his appearances at various conventions and autograph signings, often setting up lonely tables in mall food courts and other random locations. Pictures of Virgil sitting alone at these tables with no fans in sight became viral sensations on social media, with wrestling fans sharing the sad images and making jokes about his situation. The memes and jokes highlighted just how far Virgil had fallen from his days on national television every week. Reports suggested that Virgil struggled financially for years after leaving WWE, unable to find steady work outside of wrestling and lacking the star power to command significant booking fees. He became known for aggressively pursuing any opportunity to make money from his wrestling career, selling autographs and merchandise wherever anyone would let him set up a table. The desperation in his approach became obvious to everyone who encountered him at these events, with stories spreading about his pushy sales tactics and inflated pricing. Virgil charged high prices for photographs and autographs despite his status as a mid-card performer from decades ago, leading to confrontations with fans who felt the prices were unreasonable. His financial struggles became so well known that other wrestlers and industry insiders would reference him as an example of what not to do after your wrestling career ends. The man who once stood on stage with one of wrestling's biggest stars now barely drew a crowd at fan conventions. His attempts to capitalize on his wrestling fame became increasingly desperate, including selling personal items and memorabilia that should have been kept for sentimental value. Virgil's financial situation illustrated the harsh reality facing many wrestlers who never reached the top tier of the industry, showing how quickly the money dries up when you're no longer on television. The bodyguard who protected the $1 Million Man couldn't protect his own financial future, ending up as a cautionary tale about the importance of planning for life after wrestling. Marty Jannetty formed one half of the legendary Rockers tag team alongside Shawn Michaels, dazzling audiences with high-flying moves and innovative tag team wrestling in the late 80s and early 90s. The partnership seemed destined for tag team championship glory and long-term success, with both men displaying incredible athleticism and charisma. Everything changed when Michaels superkicked Jannetty through the barbershop window, ending the team and launching Michaels towards superstardom while Jannetty's career took a very different path. While Michaels became the Heartbreak Kid and eventually a multiple-time world champion, Jannetty struggled with personal demons and poor decisions that derailed his career repeatedly. He had brief returns to WWE and worked for various other wrestling companies, but never came close to achieving the success that his former partner enjoyed. Jannetty's personal problems became more famous than his wrestling abilities, with arrests and bizarre behavior making headlines more often than his matches. His financial situation deteriorated as his booking opportunities dried up, with promoters hesitant to hire someone with such an unpredictable track record. Jannetty burned bridges throughout the wrestling industry with his unreliable behavior, making it nearly impossible to maintain steady income from wrestling. Stories circulated about him missing bookings, showing up to events in poor condition, and generally being difficult to work with despite his obvious talent. The money he earned during his prime years vanished through a combination of poor spending habits, legal troubles, and missed opportunities that better planning could have prevented. Jannetty ended up working odd jobs outside of wrestling just to survive, a shocking fall for someone who once performed in front of millions on WWE television. His multiple arrests over the years added legal fees and fines to his financial burden, creating a cycle of debt that seemed impossible to escape. Social media posts from Jannetty revealed a life far removed from the glory days of wrestling in sold-out arenas, showing someone struggling with basic financial stability. He became another example of wasted potential in wrestling, someone with all the tools for success who couldn't overcome personal demons. Jannetty's story highlighted how two people from the same starting point can end up in completely different financial situations based on their choices and circumstances. The contrast between Jannetty and Michaels became one of wrestling's most striking examples of divergent paths, with one man becoming a legend and Hall of Famer while the other struggled to pay rent. His fall from grace served as a reminder that talent alone doesn't guarantee success or financial security in the wrestling business. Scott Hall revolutionized wrestling as Razor Ramon in WWE and later became one of the founding members of the New World Order in WCW, helping to change the entire landscape of professional wrestling. The bad guy oozed charisma, had a look that connected with audiences, and possessed incredible in-ring psychology that made every match feel important. Hall earned massive contracts from both WWE and WCW during the peak years of professional wrestling, with WCW in particular paying enormous guaranteed money during the Monday Night Wars. But Hall's demons were as powerful as his persona, with alcohol and substance abuse problems plaguing him throughout his career and eventually destroying everything he built. His addictions became so severe that they cost him jobs, relationships, and the vast fortune he accumulated during his wrestling prime. Hall's drinking problems were well documented, with multiple incidents and arrests related to alcohol abuse making news over the years. WWE fired Hall multiple times due to his inability to stay sober, and each time he seemed to spiral deeper into addiction rather than getting help. The guaranteed WCW money eventually dried up when that company went out of business, leaving Hall without the massive paychecks he had become accustomed to receiving. His financial situation collapsed as quickly as his physical health, with years of substance abuse taking a terrible toll on his body and mind. Stories emerged about Hall living in terrible conditions, unable to afford proper housing despite once earning millions from wrestling contracts. His weight fluctuated dramatically, his health deteriorated visibly, and he appeared at independent wrestling shows looking like a shadow of his former self. The man who once dripped with machismo and confidence now struggled to complete basic wrestling matches without obvious difficulty. Hall's financial troubles became intertwined with his addiction issues, creating a vicious cycle where he needed money to survive but couldn't get booked because of his unreliability. He pawned championship belts and other wrestling memorabilia just to get by, selling pieces of his legacy for cash to fund his daily expenses. The bad guy who once threw toothpicks at opponents now couldn't afford dental work, with missing teeth becoming a visible sign of his decline. Friends within the wrestling industry tried multiple interventions to help Hall get clean and regain control of his life, but the addiction kept pulling him back down. Diamond Dallas Page eventually stepped in to help Hall just as he had done with Jake Roberts, offering support and rehabilitation assistance. The intervention came just in time, as Hall's health had deteriorated to the point where death seemed imminent without immediate changes. Even with help, Hall had lost essentially everything he earned during his wrestling career, forcing him to start over financially despite his legendary status. His story became another example of how addiction can destroy even the most successful wrestling career and drain away millions in earnings. The Razor Ramon character was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, but the man behind the character had to rebuild his entire life from nothing. Tammy Sytch achieved fame as Sunny during WWE's Attitude Era, becoming one of the most downloaded personalities on the internet during the late 90s. Her beauty and charisma made her a star, and she appeared regularly on WWE programming as a manager and personality. Sunny earned decent money during her time with WWE and seemed positioned for long-term success in the wrestling industry. But personal problems began to mount almost immediately after her wrestling career ended, with legal troubles and addiction issues consuming her life. Sytch was arrested numerous times over the years for various offenses including multiple DUI charges that showed a pattern of dangerous behavior. Each arrest brought legal fees, fines, and increasingly serious consequences that drained whatever money she had saved during her wrestling days. Her attempts to capitalize on her wrestling fame often went in unfortunate directions, making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Sytch tried to maintain income through autograph signings and convention appearances, but her reputation preceded her and booking opportunities became scarce. Stories circulated about her unreliable behavior and difficult personality, making promoters hesitant to hire her even for basic appearances. Financial desperation led Sytch to some questionable decisions about how to monetize her fame, choices that damaged her reputation further within wrestling circles. She burned through any goodwill she had built during her WWE days through a combination of poor choices and illegal behavior. The arrests continued to pile up over the years, with each one adding to her legal problems and financial burden. Sytch's situation deteriorated to the point where she ended up serving jail time for her various offenses, taking her completely out of any potential earning opportunities. The woman who was once one of wrestling's most popular personalities became known more for her arrests than her accomplishments. Her financial collapse was complete, with reports suggesting she had essentially nothing left from her earnings during her prime years. The tragic nature of her fall was compounded by the fact that she had multiple opportunities to turn things around but continued making destructive choices. Sytch's story served as a warning about how quickly fame can fade and how personal problems can destroy any financial security. Her legal troubles eventually culminated in a serious car accident while driving under the influence, resulting in the death of another person and leading to significant prison time. The criminal charges and civil liability from the fatal accident ensured that Sytch would face financial and legal consequences for years to come. Her journey from WWE star to convicted felon shocked many wrestling fans who remembered her from her glory days. The financial and personal destruction was complete, showing how addiction and poor choices can take someone from the top of the wrestling world to rock bottom. Lex Luger was positioned as the next big thing in wrestling multiple times throughout his career, with both WCW and WWE trying to make him their top star. The total package had the look, the physique, and the backing of major wrestling companies, earning substantial money during the peak years of professional wrestling. Luger's contracts with WCW in particular were extremely lucrative, with guaranteed money that made him one of the highest paid performers in the business. His relationship with fellow wrestler Miss Elizabeth became tabloid fodder, especially after her tragic death at the house they shared in the early 2000s. The circumstances surrounding Elizabeth's death led to legal troubles for Luger, including drug charges that further complicated his situation. His wrestling career essentially ended after Elizabeth's death, cutting off his primary source of income while his expenses remained high. Luger's financial problems mounted as he faced legal fees, medical bills, and the loss of wrestling income all at the same time. He had made good money during his career but spent lavishly without proper planning for the future or unexpected circumstances. The guaranteed WCW contracts had ended when that company closed, and WWE showed no interest in bringing him in after his legal troubles. His health took a devastating turn when he suffered a spinal stroke that left him temporarily paralyzed and required extensive rehabilitation. The medical emergency and subsequent treatment created enormous bills that insurance didn't fully cover, adding to his financial burden. Luger went from bodybuilder physique and wrestling superstar to someone who needed help with basic daily activities, a shocking and rapid decline. The combination of legal troubles, medical expenses, and loss of income destroyed whatever financial security Luger had built during his wrestling career. He had to sell possessions and rely on help from others to survive during the darkest period of his life. The man who was supposed to be wrestling's next big star ended up broken, fighting just to regain basic mobility. Luger eventually recovered enough to regain the ability to walk and function independently, a miraculous turnaround from his initial prognosis. But the financial damage had been done, with years of income lost and massive expenses incurred during his medical crisis. His story illustrated how quickly health problems can combine with other issues to completely destroy someone's financial situation. The total package became a cautionary tale about the importance of having financial reserves for unexpected emergencies and not assuming the money will always keep flowing. Luger's faith became an important part of his recovery and helped him rebuild his life, even though his finances never recovered to their previous levels. His openness about his struggles helped other wrestlers understand the importance of planning for the worst while hoping for the best. Kurt Angle achieved incredible success in WWE after winning an Olympic gold medal in wrestling, becoming one of the company's top stars and multiple-time world champion. His intensity, technical skill, and surprising comedic ability made him a complete performer who could work any style or storyline. Angle earned excellent money during his WWE run and seemed to have a bright future with the company for years to come. But his body broke down from the intense style he worked and the injuries he accumulated over years of wrestling. Angle became dependent on pain medication to deal with his injuries, leading to addiction problems that cost him his WWE job. The company released him due to concerns about his health and substance abuse, cutting off his primary income source while his expenses remained high. His move to TNA Wrestling provided some income but nothing close to what WWE had been paying, and his ongoing health problems made it difficult to maintain a full schedule. Angle's addiction issues continued despite losing his WWE spot, with multiple arrests and incidents showing he hadn't gotten his problems under control. The legal troubles added fees and fines to his financial burden while also damaging his reputation and future earning potential. Stories emerged about Angle's financial struggles despite his Hall of Fame-worthy career, with reports suggesting poor investments and ongoing expenses eating through his earnings. His multiple divorces also took significant portions of his wealth, with settlements and ongoing payments reducing his available funds. The Olympic hero who became a wrestling champion found himself in a financial hole despite earning millions during his career. Angle eventually got his personal life under control and returned to WWE for a final run, but the years of poor financial management had taken their toll. He had to continue wrestling longer than planned just to rebuild his financial security, putting additional wear on an already damaged body. The intensity that made him a star also destroyed his body and contributed to the addiction problems that derailed his finances. His story showed how even the most successful and talented wrestlers can fall into financial trouble through a combination of health problems, addiction, and poor planning. Angle's eventual recovery and WWE return provided some financial stability, but he never fully recovered the wealth he lost during his darkest years. The Olympic gold medalist learned the hard way that medals and championships don't guarantee financial security without proper management. Sunny days turned dark for Tammy Sytch, but another wrestler who struggled was Test, the big man who had a promising career in WWE during the Attitude Era. Test worked main event programs, dated Stephanie McMahon on screen, and seemed positioned for long-term success with the company. His size, look, and improving wrestling ability should have guaranteed him steady work for years. But personal problems and alleged substance issues led to his release from WWE, ending his guaranteed income and forcing him to work the independent circuit for much less money. Test bounced around different wrestling companies after leaving WWE, never finding the same level of success or financial security. His booking fees dropped dramatically without the WWE platform, and his expenses remained high despite earning less money. Reports suggested Test struggled financially in the years after leaving WWE, unable to find steady work outside wrestling and burning through whatever savings he had accumulated. His death in his apartment at just 33 years old shocked the wrestling world and highlighted the dangers wrestlers face. The circumstances of his death raised questions about his lifestyle and health in the years after leaving WWE. Test's financial situation at the time of his death remained unclear, but the fact that he was living in a modest apartment rather than a nice house suggested money problems. His promising career never reached the heights many predicted, and his life ended before he could rebuild his finances or career. The big man who stood toe-to-toe with WWE's biggest stars ended up as another cautionary tale about planning for the future. China broke barriers as the first woman to compete regularly with men in WWE, becoming Intercontinental Champion and a major star during the Attitude Era. The ninth wonder of the world earned substantial money during her peak years with WWE, with merchandise sales, appearance fees, and wrestling income all contributing to her wealth. China seemed positioned for long-term success both inside and outside wrestling with her crossover appeal and unique position in the industry. Her relationship and subsequent breakup with Triple H coincided with her departure from WWE, cutting off her primary income source at a crucial time. China struggled to find work in wrestling after leaving WWE, with the company not bringing her back and other promotions unable to offer comparable money. Her attempts to maintain income through various ventures outside wrestling met with mixed results, some generating publicity but not sustainable income. Financial problems mounted as China's wrestling opportunities dried up and her expenses remained high from her days as a major star. She made headlines for her personal problems and struggles rather than her accomplishments, damaging her ability to capitalize on her wrestling fame. Reports suggested China faced serious financial difficulties in the years after leaving WWE, unable to maintain the lifestyle she had during her peak years. Her death in her apartment at age 46 shocked wrestling fans and ended any possibility of a comeback or financial recovery. The circumstances suggested someone who had struggled in her final years, far removed from the glamour and success of her WWE days. China's posthumous induction into the WWE Hall of Fame came too late to help her financially or provide the closure she sought. The pioneering female wrestler who broke barriers and achieved unprecedented success ended up broken, a tragic ending to a groundbreaking career. Her story illustrated how quickly wrestling fame can fade and how difficult it is to maintain income after leaving the industry. The ninth wonder of the world became another cautionary tale about the importance of financial planning and having income sources beyond wrestling. If these stories of financial ruin shocked you and made you think twice about how quickly fortune can disappear, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because wrestling history is full of more untold stories and shocking truths that deserve to be heard, and you won't want to miss what we cover next.